Good afternoon, good evening, good day, all that good stuff. Welcome again. Thank you for tuning in because that's two things you can't get back is your attention and your time. So you tuning in, I greatly appreciate it. This video is going to go over Clarence Thomas because Clarence Thomas is probably one of the most disliked persons in this country right now, especially being a primary figure in overturning Roe versus Wade and also uh, changing up some of these New York gun laws, to have people carry guns a little bit easier than New York allowed. So this gentleman is someone that's in the media right now. And one of the things that sparked me to do this video was because Clarence Thomas has been considered a sellout, Uncle Tom, COON, can't say the word like that, for years. And some of the reasons why he has been considered that is because, like most people would say, he has a white wife, which to each his own, and all of that. And that some of his actions and policies have been counter to blacks. And he hasn't really operated in a way that has been beneficial to blacks. They've actually set the progress of black people in reverse. So anytime you have someone that sets the progress of black people collectively in reverse, and the things that you do have severe harm primarily to those that are black, then you are considered an Uncle Tom or a sellout or a COON. And Clarence Thomas is one of those figures that for decades has been considered a high-level supreme general sellout. And I'm not going to use Uncle Tom because Uncle Tom is really a hero. In the book, if you look at Uncle Tom's Cabin, a book that came out, pretty much during the slave times when slavery was almost on its way out, the character Uncle Tom was actually a martyr, right? He actually had a bleeding heart for his fellow slaves and their freedom and their well-being. So Uncle Tom is a compliment. So in this video, I'm not going to call Clarence Thomas an Uncle Tom. I'm going to call him a sellout. And a lot of the basis for me using that term, aside from the fact that he was considered that amongst blacks anyway, is I'm going to be reading from this book called The American Directory of Certified Uncle Toms. All right? Now, the reason why I wanted to focus on Clarence Thomas is because right now you have a lot of feminists, women, and a lot of white people that actually have had the audacity to kind of call him out. And actually, a few have actually called him high-level racial slurs, which shows you that there's a lot of racism in feminism. So that's why I wanted to focus on Clarence Thomas and that's why I'm titling this From Sellout the Superhero to Villain, because on one end, whites put this man in prominent position in order for him to pretty much do their bidding, which he has done. Now, he's in a situation where he done been largely responsible for two very important decisions, and now you have white people that's outside the power structure actually calling him these racial slurs and actually looking at him as one of the worst people alive. So focusing on who he is something that's very important. So I'm going to start from a part in this book where this is before he became Supreme Court Justice. And just to give a background as to why blacks call him a sellout. Okay, so I'm going to start from when he started working for what's called the EEOC. The EEOC is what's called the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Okay? The EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, is the government office designated to guard the civil rights of Americans in the workplace. And yet another special quota. Okay? So basically, this agency is responsible for kind of like, it's supposed to provide equal opportunity for people, and if there's any kind of disputes, this commission would kind of look into it or make sure it doesn't go down. But according to this, it's saying that it's pretty much a watchdog to make sure that black people don't go too far up. It says the Reaganites had figured out that if they were going to put blacks back onto the plantation, and Uncle Tom, Sellout, would have to lead them. But before his assignment, a cautious Clarence Thomas forewarned his white suitors. If I ever went to work for the EEOC or did anything directly connected with blacks, my career would be irreparably ruined. The monkey would be on my back again to prove that I didn't have the job because I'm black. People meeting me for the first time would automatically dismiss my thinking as second rate. So that's Clarence Thomas saying that. So clearly, before he took this position, he was concerned that people would connect him with blacks, and he was concerned that for this reason they would think that his decisions is second rate and not efficient. So he was already concerned about his connection with black people because of how it looked on his career. That's notable, right? That's a big foundation and a big characteristic of what sellouts, or people that are considered sellouts, have, is how they're viewed in relation to them being black and other black people and their work ethic and their career. Okay? Thomas went to work for the EEOC, first as part of a transition team, later as its chairman. His entire workload directly connected with blacks. Thomas was sworn in by a team of legendary racial tyrants, including Attorney General Edward Meese, Civil Rights Division official Bradford Reynolds, and Senator Strom Thurmond. Google Strom Thurmond if you want to know about racism and political atmosphere. Once again, Thomas secured the job because he was black, and for that fact alone. If there's a black job in Washington, it is that of chairman of the EEOC. And with Reagan's strategy of undermining legal remedies for discrimination in full effect, the position will go empty before a white man could have it. So, you start to see Clarence Thomas upwardly rise during the Reagan administration, an administration which is notorious for cutting off programs that benefited blacks. Okay? So, that administration realized that in order for them to curtail blacks moving too rapidly, and we're going to tie this into with abortion and kind of tease to the real reason why they passed Roe versus Wade, okay? But before we get to that, they had to have a black person in these positions, okay? And if you have a black person in these positions, just like if you have a black president, it could no longer be said that there's discrimination. This is a tactic that's used to curtail blacks from prominence, okay? If you put a black in a position that you can trust, it satisfies, it backs people down from saying that it's racist, because how can it be racist if a black person is there? And also, if you put a black that's a sellout, it also allows you to have him be controlled and to do your bidding, which is what Clarence Thomas has done. So they're saying that this position had to be filled by a black person. Okay. This is during the Reagan administration where this guy starts to get his bones. We offered it to 10 or 12 other blacks, and nobody wanted to take it. So clearly they knew what was going on with this position. It was a token seat. We offered it to 10 or 12 other blacks, and nobody wanted to take it, a White House aide told Newsweek. Thomas, now the most quoted and affirmative action black in the history of government preferences, gleefully set about to make racial discrimination the law of the land. Thomas slashed the number of class action suits his office handled, reduced staff, shifted the burden of proof from employers to employees, and allowed the backlog of cases to grow to 46,000 and the processing time of complaints to increase to 10 months. He also allowed the statute of limitations to expire in 13,000 age discrimination claims. Indicative of the philosophy of the Thomas tenure at the EEOC was the argument by his chief of staff, Jeffrey Zuckerman, that the Equal Pay Act actually hurt blacks. From there, Thomas, okay, so as you can see, already, just by his actions in the EEOC, he's already benefited corporate America, right? He's already benefited institutions by pretty much not ruling in the favor of the little guy or the little person, but ruling in the favor of the big guy, government, corporations, things of that nature. So this is who he was before he even became Supreme Court Justice. All right, he was already groomed to be a company man. All right. From there, Thomas went to the federal bench where a race-mired Bush administration appointed minorities to high-profile positions when it served their public relations needs. Now remember, George Bush Sr. was the vice president of Reagan. So Thomas coming up during Reagan is the same as Thomas coming up during Bush when he was appointed Supreme Court Justice. So now you're seeing a conservative, Republican, older white man dominated type of mindset in Clarence Thomas. So automatically he's going to be anti-liberal, anti-democrat to some degree, and he's not going to have the primary interest be amongst black people. All right? Because he came up under two regimes that are highly conservative. Okay. After just 15 months on this dole, Bush brilliantly chose Thomas for the Supreme Court post, superficially to diffuse the fallout from his notoriously racist Willie Horton political advertising campaign. Once again, Thomas's race is his meal ticket. Bush's staff briefly considered a Hispanic with an eye toward the next election, but chose the Uncle Tom Negro for the political damage it would wreak upon the liberal establishment. According to the book Capital Gains, they, Reagan and Bush, needed blacks who agreed with them, and there were not many such candidates around. Thus Thomas, always with his hand full of gimme, mouth full of much obliged, was honored with a Supreme Court nomination. Even Thomas's strong principles stand against interracial marriage couldn't stand in his way. His new Caucasian wife, Virginia Lamp, came from a family that provided the backbone of Goldwater Support, Nebraska. Lamp's family welcomed Thomas like a son. Check this out. He was so nice, we forgot he was black, her Aunt Opal Knopp told the Washington Post. And he treated her so well, all of his other qualities made up for his being black. So this is his wife's family saying this. They forgot he was black, and his other qualities made up for being black. This is already telling you who we're dealing with. Let me keep going. With his new white family accepting him so liberally, Thomas had no use for his old black one. He told a reporter that his own sister gets mad when the mailman is late with her welfare check. That is how dependent she is. Thomas continued, what's worse is that now her kids feel entitled to the check too. They have no motivation for doing better or getting out of that situation. Thomas's statements were lies. His sister once had to accept public assistance when caring for an aunt who had a stroke, but she had long since stopped receiving any form of welfare and was in fact working. Thomas claimed to have driven to Georgia to apologize to his sister, but she has no recollection of it. So he even talked ill of his sister and kind of fabricated that she was perpetually on welfare, which she wasn't. It was a one-off to help another family member, and then she got off. So this is very important to look at, because this is the type of person that we have that's making these decisions, right? Because his next move is to look at overturning, I guess, gay marriages, revisiting that. So he's looking to revisit at a whole lot of things that are in place. So a person that is a sellout for blacks is now also someone that's highly disliked. Highly disliked. So the question becomes, is this man someone that has his own agenda, or is he so much of a sellout that all his actions is based upon what tenured older white males in office in politics want him to do? Is he a puppet? Is he a puppet for these tenured white men in politics. Now, let's get to this Roe v. Wade situation and why I say that. And I'm gonna do a video on this next. It's some that believe that this Roe v. Wade and overturning abortion was because white people's numbers and population are dwindling, right? And because their numbers are dwindling, it's said that by 2050, that the entire world is pretty much going to be mixed, intermingled. You're not really going to have a white person in existence. So could this have been, this Roe v. Wade overturning, a way to save the white population? And who better to overturn Roe v. Wade to save the white population than Clarence Thomas, who has been known as a sellout and who's been known as one of the biggest agents in the interests of white people. So when you look at his decisions, the question should be, is all the decisions that he's standing firm on solely for the benefit of the elevation of the white race? Period. So whether you're a feminist, whether you're a white person, a non-black person, when you look at this man's actions, ask yourself, does the decisions that he's standing firm on, who benefits the most from these decisions? And if each time you look at the decisions that he's hugely for, if the primary benefactors of his decisions is white people, then you know that his sellout activity is strictly for the empowerment of white men. Simple as that. Clarence Thomas is the superhero for the white man. So follow his decisions, and I'm going to end it by reading off some of the decisions that he made just to give some context to this theory. The racial record of Justice Clarence Thomas. White folks could not be happier with their black conservative lawn jockey, whose racial activism has reached far beyond the judicial branch and includes his participation in the recent Supreme coup d'etat. Thomas joined with his white colleagues who voted to ignore the obvious vote tampering and racist poll practices in Florida to award the American presidency to the simpleton son of the man that ushered Thomas onto the bench. So, this is saying that when the George Bush Jr. election happened with him and Al Gore, and they pretty much stole that because Al Gore won, but then Bush won, they're saying that Clarence Thomas voted to ignore the obvious vote tampering and racist poll practices in Florida, which makes sense because George Bush's father, George Bush Sr., is the one that put him in office. Check for putting the highest interests of his position for white men. A couple of months later, Thomas provided the swing vote in Atwater versus Lago Vista, which held that police officers can arrest and handcuff people even for the most minor offenses, effectively giving racist police another weapon for abuse. Check again for the benefactor of being white man. But prior to those most flagrant acts of racial repression, Thomas spent his first years as the proverbial spook who sat by the Supreme Court door. He sat silently through hundreds of cases, often appearing disengaged. Once Thomas did speak up, the results, accurately summed up by Tom columnist Jack E. White, were devastating. The most disturbing thing about Thomas is not his conclusions. Well, we'll skip that. Thomas's conservatism during his first year on the bench surprised even his most ardent critics. The late jurist A. Leon Higginbotham estimated that Thomas's rulings have done more to turn back the clock of racial progress than any other African American public official in the history of this country. Emerge magazine summarized Thomas's corrosive influence among the payoffs for the forces of white supremacy. Here's some of the cases that he ruled against. Presley versus Etowah County. He voted to support a controversial decision by white commissioners in an Alabama county to remove the budgetary power of the first black commissioner to be elected since Reconstruction. Hudson versus McMillan, 1992, affirmed the right of a Louisiana prison guard to severely beat an inmate who was hogtied to the floor. Shaw versus Reno, 1993, voted to reject an odd-shaped majority black congressional district in North Carolina because it sought to correct an obvious Jim Crow voting history. Sale versus Haitian Centers Council, 1993, voted to uphold a presidential directive allowing the Coast Guard to intercept vessels illegally transporting Haitians to the U.S. and return them without first determining if they qualify as refugees. I'm going to read that one again. Voted to uphold a presidential directive allowing the Coast Guard to intercept vessels illegally transporting Haitians to the U.S. and return them without first determining if they qualify as refugees. Now, the reason why I read that twice is because when you see refugees coming into this country, right, the way America works and the way Western civilization works, again, anytime you hear Western civilization, they're talking about white nations. You talk about Eastern civilizations, they're talking about black nations. And for this video, black is pretty much non-whites, right? So the fact that he voted for the Coast Guard to intercept this vessel, which supposedly had illegal Haitians in it, is suspect because there's, if you look at the Texas border now, there seems to be running rampant illegal aliens coming in this country unstopped, right? Who are not black, they're not of African descent, they're not of dark Caribbean descent like Haitians. That's because Western civilization, white people, white civilization, they will always allow for white immigrants to come in uninhibited, untampered. If it's dark-skinned refugees, that's when you see an issue. And if you don't believe me, test it out. You see it with Ukraine. You see it with Hispanics, right? You see it constantly. Anytime you have refugees amongst Western civilization and Western nations, they do not restrict them from coming into their territory because that's part of Western domination, is to have themselves be in high numbers, but have darker immigrants or refugees not come because you don't want to make it too brown. So this is something that we need to look at. So the fact that this black man who was in a position to use his status and his authority to actually not block this vessel with Haitians shows that he is a guardian for the white man. Okay, and I don't even like to do race videos, but since he's so he's a hot topic right now with all of these decisions going on, it's important to know who we're dealing with. So anytime you see a black person in a prominent position, right, they're most likely, not saying you can't achieve, this ain't that, but you have to look at what they do. And if their actions constantly counter the progress of blacks and it elevates white people, like Clarence Thomas, bona fide sellout. So all the decisions that you see, I'm almost certain of it, Clarence Thomas do, is going to, the biggest benefactor is going to be the white man. Hands down. So that's why I wanted to stop there with that. Missouri versus Jenkins. He voted to overrule a lower court desegregation order requiring the Kansas City, Missouri School District to, among other things, continue to fund remedial quality education programs because of low student achievement levels. Podboreski versus Kruan, 1995. He voted in favor of a student who identified himself as both white and Hispanic and who sued a university because he was not eligible for black scholarship use to attract high-achieving blacks. Voted to limit affirmative action, set aside programs aimed to help minority businesses gain a larger share of federal contracts. Wisconsin versus City of New York, 1996. He voted not to require the government to adjust the 1990 census to account for about 4.8% of blacks and 5.2% of Hispanics believed to have missed or uncounted. Shaw versus Hunt and Bush versus Vera voted in a pair 5-4 decisions to declare unconstitutional 5 congressional districts in Texas and North Carolina, which were drawn to maximize black and Hispanic political clout because race was the predominant factor in their design. Texas versus Hopwood, 1996. He voted to let stand a ruling against the University of Texas holding that the law school may not use race as a factor in law school admissions. The 3-judge appellate decision barring schools in Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi, and if left intact, could overturn the Beck decision, which allows race to be a factor in college admissions. Clarence Thomas is the Uncle Tom of the New Age, sellout of the New Age. He has ridden his Negro-ness to heights and depths unattainable to any honorable face fidelity. His place in the history of white supremacy is well secured. So, with that, I'm going to conclude and say look out for the rest of his decisions. He's supposedly going to look at gay marriage. He's supposedly going to look at quite a few things. So just be mindful that his decisions will benefit white people, especially white men. Guaranteed. He has a track record of that. It's happening now with Roe v. Wade. And this is how sellouts roll. So that was a brief examination of Clarence Thomas, so we know exactly what we're dealing with. Thank you again. Hit the subscribe button. You know what I'm saying? Because that puts me in a position where I could do some things and bring greater content videos, better visuals, and all that. Thanks for your time. Peace.